We started last week this series called The Problem of God. And what we're doing is each week we're taking one of the subject matters that's covered in this book called The Problem of God. This book was written by Mark Clark. He's a pastor up in Canada. Last week I didn't push this book too much because we ran out. We got some more in this week. They're $10 a copy. We make zero money on it, but they're out there on the table, all right? So if you want to follow along with us, or maybe you're just a guest and this is the only weekend you're going to be here, hey, grab a copy of this book, and let me just tell you some of the things it's going to cover in here. The reality is that Mark Clark was a skeptic who's been saved by the gospel, and he knows the questions that skeptics have. Well, how does he know that? Because he was one. And here are some of the topics that we are going to cover. Last week we covered the problem of God and the problem of science, We talked about, is science and religion, are they diametrically opposed to one another? Do they coexist? Can they coexist? We know what the world says no, but go back and listen to the message. I hope you'll enjoy it. Today, we're talking about the problem of God's existence. Does God even exist? Buckle up, it should be fun. Next week, we'll talk about the problem of the Bible, then the problem of the Christ myth, then the problem of evil and suffering, then the problem of hell, the problem of sex, the problem of hypocrisy, the problem of exclusivity, and we'll wrap it all up with the problem of Jesus. If you get the book, don't worry. I'm doing my best not to preach things that he wrote in this book. I'm gathering other resources and everything, so I'm not just regurgitating the chapters. They'll coincide with one another, and together I think that we'll build a strong case and be able to answer many of the questions that skeptics have about God. Everybody got it? Say got it. Out there on the table, $10 if you want one, buy them all because we don't want them, all right? So let's talk today about the problem of God. Specifically, let's talk about the problem of God's existence. Maybe you've been there like I have in my life. Is God real? Does God really exist? Maybe you're like me. I've asked that question in my life. I've thought of that in my life. And if you are human, I believe that thought has at least entered your mind at some point in some time. Now, the narrative that is put out in our day and time is simply this. We know, not we think, but we know God does not exist. Because science has proven it. This is the narrative that seems to be floating around in our day and time. Or maybe I could be even more direct than that. It's not the narrative that's just floating around. It is the story that is being told. We don't need God. God is not alive. God is dead. As a matter of fact, God doesn't even exist. And we know this because science has proven it. The problem with those statements is they're completely false. Science has not proven that God does not exist. As a matter of fact, the more and more evidence that is being mounted up and gathered from cosmology, from biology, from paleontology, and all the other ologies, what they're pointing us to is the reality of this, is there has to be some kind of creator, designer behind this creation and behind this design. But everybody doesn't believe that. As a matter of fact, let me start by sharing with you a few convictions within our world. I'm going to just share three very broad general categories of convictions that people have in our world. Within these three, there are nuances for sure, but I believe these three cover the big. Number one are the atheists. Atheists are those who would say we are anti-theists. We just don't believe there's a God. Maybe that's you. Maybe you're sitting here right here today and you're thinking, what am I doing? This is whack-a-doodle-doo. These people are crazy. They are off their rocker. I'm going to hurt my friend for making me come. Well, maybe that's you today. And you're sitting here and you are convinced beyond a shadow of a doubt that there is no God. As a matter of fact, if we said, hey, can we talk about God? You would shut the conversation down immediately by saying, I just don't believe there's a God. Those are atheists. There's a bunch of nuances in between there, but we can't cover them all. Secondly is a group called agnostics. These are the people who tend to take what seemingly is a humble approach. I say seemingly because it's not really a humble approach, but it seems that way. And here's their approach. Their approach is, I don't really see enough evidence that there is a God, but, I'm not sure that there's not a God, so here's where I'm going to land. If there's a God, we cannot know for sure. And I say it's seemingly a humble approach because it seems like they're meeting everyone in the middle. They just want everybody to get along. But by asserting in their belief that you cannot know if there's a God for sure, they are in fact defeating the very claim that they are claiming to be true. Because if you cannot know that there's a God for sure, then you just made a for sure claim about a God that you said you couldn't know. At least there's one thing you say you can't know about God, and that is that you can't know that for sure if there is a God. And so their argumentation, their thought process, actually, it is defeating upon itself. And then there's theism. There's a lot of nuances in agnosticism as well. If you're here, I'm glad you're here as well. Theism. What is theism? It is the belief that there is a God, that there is a designer, that someone or something or someone's or some things, that there is a God or God force out there. There's something supernatural. They're theists. They believe in a God. Now, Christianity is a nuance of this. We're not just theists, although we are at baseline. We are theists. That's what I am. I hope you're okay with that today. And I hope you would assume that if I'm preaching the Bible and talking to you about God and Jesus, that I would at least believe there is a God, right? Everybody got it? Say got it. So those are the big convictions in our world. My guess is all of us fall somewhere within those three tribes. I will not spend time today discussing much about atheism or agnosticism. What I want to do is I want to look at not just the convictions of our world, but I want to look at the clues in our world that point toward God. Are there clues? Here's what I can't do today, nor can anyone else. No one in science can prove beyond a doubt that there is a God, nor can science prove beyond a doubt that there is not a God. Science simply cannot do that. But what we can do is we can look at the clues from the natural world using reason, logic, and science, and we can see clues that are all around us that point to someone greater than us. That this whole thing that we're walking in, called life, is not an accident, but actually has really powerful clues pointing toward God. I'm going to use three realms or lines of clues today. The first one is, you may want to write this down, the clues that point to God, number one, are origin clues. These are clues of how did it all begin? Those are questions maybe you've asked or maybe you've been asked. How did everything get started? These are clues from origin. These are going to cause us to look up and look back. Look up into the starry heavens above and look back into time past. Then we're going to look at the design clues. These are clues that are obvious and becoming more obvious to us each and every day, that the world around us is not just accidentally coming about, but that is actually intricately designed just like a fine-tuned watch, but better. Number three, we'll look at the morality clues. What are some clues that we can gather just by looking around at humanity and the moral reality that exists all over the world? Everybody got it? Say got it. So let's begin today by talking about the origin clues. Why do I start with origin? Because what all scientists by and large agree upon today is this: the world, the universe, the cosmos that we know is not eternal. It came into existence at a definite time, a definite point, a definite period. It had a beginning. They call that, by and large, the Big Bang. And I want to start there because it helps us understand the law of causality. What's the law of causality? The law of causality is a fundamental principle of science. And here's what the law of causality says. Everything that had a beginning had a, say it, cause. Guess what? It's called the law of causality. Now you got it, all right? Everything that had a beginning had a what? Cause. Origin seeks to answer what is the first cause. What is the initial cause? What was there before the beginning? What caused all of this? When you woke up today, you walked outside, and most of you probably were not up before dark. But if you were up before dark and you looked out and you saw a star in the sky, well, you give it a few minutes after you wake up, and then before long, another star will seem to arise over the horizon. What is that star? We call it what? We call it the sun. Exactly. The sun is the center of our solar system, right? This is the sun. Anybody want to guess which one the sun is? Far right or far left? Far left. That's the sun. It's so big, it won't fit the screen. Now, you go and let's look at the planet. What's the first planet past the sun? Mercury. Y'all all knew that, and you know it because it's labeled up there, all right? It's very simple. Second planet is what? Venus, right? How many of you knew that without looking? Don't raise your hand. I don't want you to lie in church. Number 3, the third rock from the sun is Earth. Some of you are going, that's where that show's named. I got it now. Right, yes, exactly, right? It's the third rock from the sun is Earth. Look how massive the Earth is. Compared to the sun. Do you know that in the sun, let's just talk about our star for just a moment, the sun. Do you know that in the sun you can fit 1 million planet Earths in the sun? Like when it's like going over, I'm not thinking, man, that thing is huge. I'm thinking, man, that thing ain't that big. I think we could take it, right? No, it's 1 million Earths fit inside the sun. Number 2, do you realize that the temperature inside the sun reaches some 15 million degrees? By the way, pot roast will burn at that temperature, so don't ever try it. Do you know that light from the sun actually takes 8 minutes to get from the sun to planet Earth? Now, here's the most interesting thing I learned about the sun over my studies. The sun is a star, right? Everybody knew that, right? We got that? But it's not just a star. Do you know what it's called? It's categorized as a dwarf star. That's not a compliment, by the way. Nobody says it's a dwarf star and you think, man, that thing is massive. No, but you look at it, you're like, man, that thing is massive. When you compare it to other stars within our universe, even within our galaxy, what you find out is that it is a dwarf star. As a matter of fact, this is our solar system. Well, here's a picture of the galaxy that our solar system is in. Anybody know what the name of our galaxy is? It's the Milky Way galaxy. I know it's dangerous to talk about food in second service, but we'll go with it. It's the Milky Way. It's enormous. The distance across this galaxy, listen close, is 100,000 light years. You're not traveling from one border to the other. It's not going to happen. It is huge. As a matter of fact, our galaxy, do you know where it is in this solar system? It's one of these little white dots. That's the size of our galaxy that we are in. The size of our solar system inside of this galaxy. And let me give you a snapshot of the universe. This is a snapshot. We can't capture the whole universe, but here's a snapshot of the universe. This is the universe. This is the universe that contains our galaxy, that contains our solar system, that contains our sun and our third rock from the sun, us, which has Keller, Texas on it, and the mountain. We're about that big, right? When you think of all this, you know what all of these light things are? You know what those are? Those are actually galaxies within the universe. A galaxy is made up of hundreds of thousands of stars, each galaxy. And it is estimated, because we don't know how many galaxies are out there, but it is estimated that that the universe actually contains trillions of galaxies. Just let that sink in for just a moment. Next time you think you're awesome, just think about that. That not only are we just one galaxy in the universe, but even within our galaxy, we're not the only solar system. We're one solar system in our galaxy. And in our solar system, we're not the only planet. We ain't even the biggest planet. All of this came about at a moment in time. As a matter of fact, scientists are now being able to tell us that they can see that space continues to expand. And because you once thought it was stagnant, that it was done, that it's just what it is, but it continues to expand. And what we know by that is if you reverse engineer something that is expanding and you take it back, what they would say millions or billions of years, you'll come back to nothing. So out of nothing came everything. See, there's only two possibilities of origin. One, either it has always existed and therefore is uncaused, which we know our universe is not. It's not always been existent, therefore we can surmise, number two, that it had a beginning and was caused by something else. If anything came into existence, remember the law of causality. Anything that came into existence, anything that had a beginning, had to have something else that caused it to come into existence. I love the way that Arno Penza says it. Astronomy leads us to a unique event. This guy is at best an agnostic. Astronomy leads us to a unique event, the Big Bang. Some of you are like, we don't believe in the Big Bang. Well, yeah, you do. A universe which was created out of nothing and delicately balanced to provide exactly the conditions required to support life. In the absence, look at this, in the absence of the absurdly improbable accident, the observations of modern science seem to suggest an underlying, one might say, so let's just say it, supernatural plan. That's why the British philosopher David Hume would even say it like this: I've never asserted so absurd a proposition as that something could arise out of nothing. That means if you use the logic, if you use the reason, if you use the scientific evidence that is available to us, here's what we know. We know that our universe that we live in, that contains our galaxy, that contains our solar system, that contains our planet, that contains us, we know it came into existence at a definite point in time. As a matter of fact, Hubert Yaki would say it like this when speaking of Darwinian teachings. The idea that everything arises out of nothing. This physicist would say the belief that life on Earth arose spontaneously from non-living matter is simply a matter of, check it out, of faith in strict reductionism, and is based entirely, not partly, but entirely on what, church? On ideology. Not anything other than it just has to be that way. No wonder Psalm 19, 1 and 2 says this: the heavens declare the glory of God. And the sky above, it proclaims his handiwork. Day to day pours out speech, and night to night. What? What does night to night do? Look at it. What does it do? It reveals what? Knowledge. And when you look into the starry skies and the heavens and the universe and the galaxies and the solar system, what you realize is there has to be a beginner, because there is a beginning. Robert Jastrow, the astrophysicist, would say it like this: now we see how the astronomical evidence leads to a biblical view of the origin of the world. The details differ, but the essential elements in the astronomical and biblical accounts of Genesis are the same. The chain of events leading to man commenced suddenly and sharply at a definite moment in time. They would call it the Big Bang. And here's how the Big Bang is described. In a what? In a flash of light and energy. It's almost like someone said, let there be light. So, the clues from origin are this. A simple law of causality says that everything that has a beginning has a beginner. Everything that's created has a creator. Thus, the universe has a beginning. Therefore, the universe was created. It was caused. The law of causality. That is very simply, bottom shelf, trust me, there is more than we could ever talk about in any amount of time here together on this clue or these clues from origin. But let's move now to clues from design. Because here's what the Bible says. The Bible says, in the beginning, God, what? What did God do? He created. He created. He designed the heavens and the earth. So here's the question. Is our universe, as we look out, is our earth designed? Is our planet designed? Is our solar system designed? Is our galaxy designed? Is our universe, does it have the marks of design on it? As we look out, and then as we look in, do we have the marks of design on us? As we look inside of us, are there any telltale signs that we aren't some random chance explanation of life coming from non-life over billions of years of transferring mutations, natural selection, and the like? Is there any proof as we look out and we look in, are there any clues that we've been designed? Well, for our planet alone. Now, y'all saw how massive our planet is in compared to everything else, right? For our planet alone to contain life on it, there have to be what has been called these anthropic principles or these anthropic constants. Scientists and astronomers, they've identified 122 anthropic constants that must be in order for there to be life. Don't worry, I'm not going over 122 of them, but I will go over 5 of them. Number one anthropic constant is oxygen. Oxygen level on Earth. Let's just stop for a moment. I know we've had some really fun stuff so far. Do this with me. Breathe in. Breathe out. How many of you enjoyed that? I enjoyed that, right? That's called oxygen, right? That's called life and breath. One of the constants on Earth is the oxygen level. Our atmosphere is 21% oxygen. Here's why that matters. If those percentages decrease or increase too much, here's what will happen. If oxygen were increased to 25% in our atmosphere, you know what would happen? Fires would spontaneously combust out of nowhere. If there was more oxygen in the atmosphere, fires would just start out of nowhere. If there was less oxygen, say 15%, guess what? You couldn't breathe. We would literally suffocate to death. So one of the anthropic constants is oxygen levels. That the oxygen level of our atmosphere is exactly what is needed for life to be sustained. Number 2 is the atmospheric transparency. When you look out, can you see the stars? I know we're in the city, so it's a little bit harder, right? But when you look out, can you see stars? Our atmosphere is transparent. You can see through it. But there is an atmosphere around us, and this atmospheric transparency actually lets the exact amount of radiation in, and it keeps the exact amount of radiation out for life to exist. If our atmosphere was more or less transparent, we would either burn up or freeze or again suffocate to death. Number 3, the moon-earth gravitational interaction. Do y'all know what? The moon and earth, there's that gravitation. What's affected by that? We know this. What is it? But the tides, right? The tides, they roll in, they roll out because of the gravitational pull, the gravitational interaction between the moon and the earth. If that was off just in the slightest, what would happen? Well, we could flood or we could burn up once again. They all, again, work together. It's this atmospheric constant. If the gravitational interaction between the earth and the moon changed in the slightest, life simply could not exist. What's another anthropic constant? The carbon dioxide level. Carbon dioxide level, or CO2, right? It is now at its perfect level. If we had more carbon dioxide in the air, guess what? We'd have a greenhouse effect. and we would be in trouble. If we had less, once again, if the greenhouse effect mean we would burn this place up, right? Now, if we had less or it was lower, guess what? The plants couldn't live. They couldn't make photosynthesis. We wouldn't have oxygen. Therefore, look at your neighbor and say, you would die. Go ahead, tell them, you would die. This is another anthropic constant, is the carbon dioxide levels. Lastly is gravity. Are you experiencing gravity right now? Yes, I remember being little, and I was watching like the astronauts like float. I was like, that would be awesome. Why can't we just like float around? That would be incredible. No, it would actually be horrible. It's not a good thing. As a matter of fact, one of the anthropic constants is gravity. And gravity, listen to this, if the gravitational force on planet Earth were altered, I'm going to try to do this, by 0.0000000000000000, and there's about 20 more zeros, 1%. If it was altered in the most microscopic level of percentage, guess what? Our sun would not exist. You don't have sun, you don't have life. These are just 5 of the 122 anthropic constants that must be in place, finely tuned just to what they need to be so that life can exist on planet Earth. Either you believe that happened over just random selection over billions of years, and we happen to be the lucky ones, or you can look at this incredibly intrinsic design and go, there has to be a designer. As a matter of fact, Donald Page would say it like this: the odds against our universe randomly taking a form suitable for life is 1 out of 10 to the 124 power, a number beyond your imagination. He paints the picture of that analogy, or that number, with this analogy. He says this: let's try to visualize all the grains of sand on all the beaches on all the earth. Everybody got it? No, you don't got it, right? Why do we not got it? Because we can't, right? But just think, all the grains of sand on all the beaches on all the earth. Now let's pick out one grain from any beach and any planet. Let's mark it and code it some special way, and let's put it on a beach somewhere else. Maybe it's Maui for you, or maybe it's some other fine island that nobody knows about, and you drop it there, and you blindfold somebody and say, pick it out. The chances of that person picking out that one grain of sand on this beach that you put there that was encoded with your special message, mathematicians tell us, is a chance of 1 in 100 billion billion. Go ahead and look at your neighbor and say, it ain't going to happen. Go ahead and tell him. Go ahead and tell him. It ain't going to happen, right? 100 billion, one chance in 100 billion billion. One guy said it like this: it's like winning the lottery 100,000 times in a row. You would look at that and go, something's rigged, right? Like, something's rigged. But scientists tell us the likelihood of the Big Bang causing chaos and everything that is coming out of nothing, just by random chance and not by design, is exactly what happened, yet it is millions of more times unlikely and improbable that that would happen. No wonder Alan Sandage, he's a winner of the Crawford Prize in Astronomy, says this: I find it quite improbable that such order came out of chaos. There has to be some organizing principle. God, to me, he says, is a mystery, but is the explanation for the miracle of existence. In other words, why there is something instead of nothing. So as we look out into our universe and we look at our planet and just the reality that we have life here, we have to realize that it was finely tuned, that it was actually designed by a designer. But now let's look in. Like, what's deep inside of you? Well, if you look deep inside of you, it's probably not blue, but it looks like this. What is this, by the way? You might know? It's DNA, right? How do you know that? Because you took science. That's how you know this, right? Deoxyribonucleic acid, which is one of my favorite words to say in public randomly, all right? But deoxyribonucleic acid, what is it? It's a self-replicating material. It's present in nearly all living organisms. Now listen to this. It's the main constituent of chromosomes. And listen, it is the carrier of genetic information. It is why you look like what you look like. DNA. Don't blame your mama. Blame your DNA. Bill Gates describes DNA like this. DNA is like a computer program, but far, far more advanced than any software ever, this is my favorite word to use. What? Created. Do you know what Bill Gates knows? Bill Gates knows that software doesn't evolve out of nowhere and nothing into something. That software is designed by a designer, created by a creator. And what DNA tells us as we look deep inside of us and we get into the smallest things that we can study at this point in time in our life, here's what we understand, is that our DNA carries with it this a massive amount of information. It is constantly communicating. It's not some crazy blob of nothingness, but rather it is a intricately designed, beautiful mechanism transporting tons of information every second. As Bill Gates would say, much, much more advanced than any software we've ever seen. Designer. There is a pamphlet that's put out. It's more of a document than a pamphlet. And it's called, let me get the name of it. It's called A College Student's Back to School Guide to Intelligent Design. And what this document does is it looks at biology over the past 50 years, and it really is an argument for intelligent design. It has great arguments. As a matter of fact, if you're about to go to college, I'll post this on our Facebook this week at the Mount, and you ought to download it and just read through it. Because here's what you're not going to be taught in college. You're not going to be taught intelligent design in college. Here's what you're not probably going to be taught in high school. You're not going to be taught intelligent design in high school. Now, what they say is, as biologists have studied this over the past 50 years, they found that life is fundamentally based on three realities. Here are the three realities that life is fundamentally based on. Number one, where there's life, there is a vast amount of complex and specified information encoded in a biochemical language. Just that sentence alone hurts me. Number two, where there's life, there's a computer-like system of commands and codes that process the information. And number three, everywhere there's life, there is this irreducibly complex molecular machines and multi-machine systems. This is one of the actual arguments for intelligent design, is that you get to the place where something is so irreducibly complex, they call it IC, it's irreducibly complex. I mean, it's so complex in this minute scale that, man, we can't even talk about it. It's just crazy. But it's designed, it's so complex, it's working together in ways that we don't understand. So here's what their conclusion was. Because of these three findings that are present everywhere you find life, here's what they say. So here, where in our experience do language, which is in every form of life, complex and specified information, which we find in all of life, programming code in all of life, and machines come from? Where does let's just use logic, let's just use reason, let's just think for a minute, which is what the scientists keep telling us religious crazy people to do, think. So let's think for a moment. Where in life where do we find this? Where there's language, specified information, programming code, and machines. They only have one known source. What is it? Intelligence. They don't come about spontaneously. They're always designed. And so Stephen Meyer would say it like this: we infer that the ultimate origin of biological information is best explained as proceeding from the design of an intelligent agent or agents. At least he's being honest. In his book called The Signature in the Cell, he says, all other proposed explanations have failed. None cites a cause that is known to produce information. So those are arguments from origin and arguments or clues, if you will, from design. Lastly, let me speak to the one, it is clues from morality. In other words, everywhere you go in all of the world, there are moral codes of right and wrong. Yes or no? How many of you have traveled outside of Keller? Hold your hands up high. All right, good. How many of you have traveled outside the U.S.? Hold your hands up high. All right, how many traveled to multi places outside the U.S.? Everywhere you go, guess what there is? There's a code of right and wrong. There's a moral code everywhere you go. Here's the question. Where'd that come from? How come people, and I'm not saying everybody across the globe agrees on what is right and wrong, but I'm saying that everyone, everywhere you go, no matter where it's the most remote village in the middle of nowhere, or whether it's right next door, or even at your own dinner table, here's what we know. There are right and wrongs. There are things you do and things you do not do. Whether it's religion or not religion, there is a code of right and wrong. Where does that come from? Romans actually speaks to this in Romans 2. He says, for when Gentiles who don't have the law, by nature do what the law requires, they are law to themselves, even though they don't have the law. Look at verse 15. They show that the work of the law is written where? On their hearts. We know right and wrong. It's written on our hearts. Every single human in all of creation knows there is right and wrong. I love, well, not love, but it's a great example of what Francis Collins said. He said, if I'm walking down the riverbank and a man is drowning, even if I don't know how to swim very well, I feel this urge that the right thing to do is to try to save that person. Yes or no? Yes. Every human goes, even if you don't jump in, there's this urge inside of you, I need to do something. And he argues evolution would tell me exactly the opposite. Because what is evolution? Evolution is survival of the fittest. Evolution would look at that person drowning and go, good luck. Or evolution would actually look at that and go, ha-ha! Why? Because it's survival of the fittest. It's random selection, natural selection. Be killed, kill or be killed. And this is the problem. We know in us that nobody thinks that way. Evolution would tell me exactly the opposite, to preserve our DNA. Who cares about the guy drowning? We know this doesn't happen. When you see someone drowning, you jump in and do everything you can to save that person. If you don't believe me, just watch this.
It's the heart-stopping video the whole nation is talking about. Good Samaritans leap into raging floodwaters to save a family trapped in an overturned truck.
I need a knife! A sharp knife! Come on!
As more people rush to help, they make this shocking discovery.
We got a baby! Call 911! Baby!
A baby boy, his 2-year-old sister, and their dad are drowning.
Oh my God, it's a baby!
Their truck went into the water as a monster tornado bore down on Myrtle Springs, Texas, outside Dallas on Sunday. The rescuers frantically try to rip open the doors. Suddenly,
Give me the baby!
there's the baby boy, and he's not breathing.
I need the baby right here!
Moments later, his 2-year-old sister is rescued, still strapped in her car seat. She's not breathing either.
Blowing her mouth!
Here's what happened next. The guy shooting the video, Tom Mitchell, put his cell phone in his pocket and began administering CPR. That's why the video is jumpy.
Oh, baby, come on. Come on, baby.
A woman is praying alongside him.
In the name of Jesus.
Then just seconds later,
She is breathing. She is breathing. There she goes. Can't do it, man.
I remember seeing this video about a year ago on social media. And when I was watching it, man, the hair on my arms were just standing up. And I was like, do something! And everyone watching the video was horrified. Somebody's got to do something. That is the moral code within us that everyone has. And guess what? Evolution simply does not explain that. As a matter of fact, the clues from morality tell us this: if God does not exist, objective moral values and duties don't exist. But objective moral values and duties do exist. Therefore, God exists. Here are clues. Again, they're clues, they're pointers, they're signs that remind us that there's something out there that is bigger than us. There's something within us that's written on our heart that we know right and wrong. So let me remind you of the clear reasoning that God exists according just to all the clues. Again, all I want you to do is use logic and reason and even science. Every effect has a cause. Every scientist would say absolutely. Every creation has a creator. Every design has a designer. Every communication has a communicator. And every moral law has a moral lawgiver. Thus, here's what we see. When we look at the evidence and the clues that is out there, we can see beyond reasonable doubt that there is a God. And I know some of you that are still wrestling and doubting. You go, oh yeah, Ryan, but I have the showstopper. I have the mic dropper question. Here it is. Who created God? I'm glad you asked. And I was going to answer that for you. But I found a clip of a guy who does it way better than I ever could. So listen to this 2-minute description of where God came from.
All right, your question, where did God come from, assumes that you're thinking of the wrong, obviously it displays that you're thinking of the wrong God, because the God of the Bible is not affected by time, space, or matter. If he's affected by time, space, or matter, he's not God. Time, space, and matter is what we call a continuum. All of them have to come into existence at the same instant, because if there were matter but no space, where would you put it? If there were matter and space but no time, when would you put it? You cannot have time, space, or matter independently. They have to come into existence simultaneously. The Bible answers that in 10 words. In the beginning, there's time. God created the heaven, there's space, and the earth, there's matter. So you have time, space, matter, created a trinity of trinities there. Just, time is past, present, future. Space has length, width, height. Matter has solid, liquid, gas. You have a trinity of trinities created instantaneously. And the God who created them has to be outside of them. If he's limited by time, he's not God. The guy who created this computer is not in the computer. He's not running around in there changing the numbers on the screen, okay? The God who created this universe is outside of the universe. He's above it, beyond it, in it, through it. He's unaffected by it. So the concept that a spiritual force cannot have any effect on a material body, well then I guess you'd have to explain to me things like emotions and love and hatred and envy and jealousy and rationality. I mean, if your brain is just a random collection of chemicals that form by chance over billions of years, how on earth can you trust your own reasoning processes and the thoughts that you think? Okay, so your question, where did God come from, is assuming a limited God. And that's your problem. The God that I worship is not limited by time, space, or matter. If I could fit the infinite God in my 3-pound brain, he would not be worth worshiping, that's for certain. So that's the God that I worship. Thank you.
I told you he did a better job than I could. I started to do that. Then y'all think I'm super smart, and I'm just not, all right? So let me end by talking about some scripture. Who is this God we're talking about? It's the God that Paul speaks of and describes as he's on Mars Hill, and he's standing before all these great philosophers of the day, and as he's walked around this place, he saw all of these idols that are made. He even saw one that said, "To the unknown God." And so Paul says, there's my chance. Hey, I'm here today, and here's what I want to do. I want to talk to you about the unknown God. Because what therefore you worship as unknown, I proclaim to you. So who is this God? Who's this God? He's the God who made the world and everything in it. He's the Lord of heaven and earth. He doesn't live in temples made by man, nor is he served by human hands as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all mankind life and breath and everything. He made from one man every nation of mankind to live on the face of the earth. He's determined the allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling places, that they should seek God and hope that they might feel their way toward him and find him. Yet he's actually not far from each one of us, for in him we live and move and have our being. As even some of your own poets have said, for we are indeed his offspring. Being then God's offspring, we ought not to think that this divine being is like gold or silver, stone, an image formed by the art and imagination of man. No, those times of ignorance God once overlooked, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent, to turn, to believe in him. Because he has fixed a day on which he will judge the world in righteousness by a man whom he has appointed. And of this he has given assurance to all by raising him from the dead. Who is our God? He's the omniscient, omnipresent, Omnipotent God, all-knowing, all-powerful, ever-present. He's the loving God, the righteous God, commanding God, the living God, the one who is righteous, the one who was, the one who is to come. He's from everlasting to everlasting, the one who has put fingerprints all over his creation. So here's the reality. If you want to see evidence for God, all you have to do is look. Just look up. Look out. And keep looking out. Look back and follow it all the way back to the beginning. Hey, look inside and see the beautiful design and intricacies of each and every one of us. And just look around at the morality that obviously exists. God's fingerprint, his handiwork is literally everywhere. In a moment, we're going to stand, we're going to sing, we're just going to worship our God if you're a believer. And just worship God, our great, mighty, majestic, beautiful, powerful, almighty God. If you don't know God and you'd like to know more about him, over here to my right, to your left will be some of our encouragers. They'd love to talk to you more about God. Hey, I'm not up here saying we have all the answers, but I am saying this. We have some obvious signs. And we love to point you not just to God, but we want to point you to the God who loved you enough to lay down his life on a cross in your place and for your sins, offering you life and life to the full.